Welcome to the Queer Body. I am so excited for today. We are launching the Queer Body website at the end of the week for people who are interested in becoming members and seeing all of the content there. We are going to do a promo, which I don't know what it is because that's not my genre. But with the first month or 30 days or something, we'll be doing free memberships or free class or free complimentary coaching. So I encourage you to go check out our website at thequeerbody.com. And today I have a friend and a colleague, Sonia, and I'm so excited to have them with us. I'm going to read you their bio. Sonia Cook is also known as SJ and is a certified Ayurvedic practitioner and somatic body worker with over 2 decades of experience. They have worked with a wide variety of individuals, both clinically and as an educator. SJ is also certified yoga instructor, sound magician, and their most recent endeavor is relational coaching. Sonia is a skilled collaborator with a passion for community, arts, and well-being, and they particularly love serving their community and feeling, creating, returning, and stabilizing connection is both a natural and radical action to paving a harmonious path forward in humanity and the more than the human world. With that, I introduce you to my friend and colleague, Sonia.
Hi,
Hi, welcome.
thank you. It's so good to see you today.
It's so good to see you now that you are in more than one place. Sonia's been in California for a long time, so I get to see her at dances and events and performances because they're also an amazing performer. But now
Thank
you're up
you.
in Portland. You're in Portland today, right?
I am in Portland today, and yeah, we actually got some sunshine today, which is awesome, and kind of trying it out.
Yeah. And thanks for letting us have all the cold and rain down here in NorCal.
No problem. Don't mind at all.
So for people who are just tuning into the audio, Sonia is lifting up her gay as fuck cup and having a sip. That is awesome.
I love this cup so much.
So Sonia, I want to start with, what does it mean to be queer to you?
Hmm. Thank you for asking. I've been contemplating that a lot, often. I think there's multiple points of that question and multiple layers of that answer. I think when I think of the word queer, it feels very much like living life on my own terms,
Mm-hmm.
and really getting to show up to who I am. And I personally also relate queer to my sexual identity, gender identity. But I also sometimes separate the two as well, because when I think of myself, like, I love the word gay for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, it makes me smile and feel joyful. But so I personally associate queer a little bit more broadly than sexual identity or gender identity for myself, but really just like also the way I think, the way I live my life. And that it's just like a constant turning in and checking in of desiring to do that as the most authentically as I can.
Well, let's unpack some of that because it's fun.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to be gay?
Oh. I mean, gay is
It just makes
fun.
you happy. You're
Yeah,
gay.
gay is fun.
Yeah.
Makes me happy. I mean, and I guess that could mean, like, what are my sexual desires? Or, for me, I've always had like a propensity or more of a attraction towards people of the same anatomy as myself. And and really relish in the relational components of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's a little piece for me. And I think the word gay for me also, it feels like my essence. Like there's something in that that just like my essence wise just feels like lifted when I connect to that word and that identity in myself.
It's so funny because, I think I'm a little bit older than you, although I don't really know. We might be similar, but you
I think
actually,
you're, yeah, I think you're a little older than me.
maybe 10 years? I don't know.
I'm 43.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
55. Well, 55 in June. Um, I'm early dating myself. But I always thought of gay as my, and I mean this with all the love and respect for my fags. I
Yeah.
I never think about as a woman claiming the term gay. It was like the boys are gay. And then I had to be a dyke, and I certainly didn't want to be a dyke. That was not my thing. So that's okay. So for me, I was never like, oh, yeah, gay. So it's
Yeah.
wonderful to hear you reclaim it. And particularly
Yeah.
being such a joyous human, it suits you well.
Well, and also I think, I love that you brought that in because and a lot of identities suit me. Dyke feels good at times. Honestly, sometimes my identity feels good depending on the context in which it's being held or what's in the room
Yeah.
at times, and but growing up, a lot of my adolescent years, gays, fags, whatever the identification at that time was, were a huge part of my formative community, and a huge part of my mom's community. So I think that um, that probably has also shaped some of my own identifications
So then what
as
is the
well.
delineation between gay and queer? So you're kind of separating them. I'd
Yeah,
love to hear how they separate for you.
I think for myself,
Of
and
course, that's what we want to
yeah,
hear.
yeah, because I know that it can be such a personal, individual experience of identification. I think for myself, when I think of the difference between queer and gay, when I think of gay for myself, I'm really leaning more towards my sexuality.
Hmm.
When I think of queer for myself, I think I'm really leaning more towards um, my thinking or my mindset, or yeah, like the very non-traditional ways that I tend to live my life. Yeah,
I really like
and
that. So how does one think queer? Teach us, oh guru.
well, I don't know.
What is
I
queer
mean,
thinking?
I mean, that could be, like, hmm, that could be inclusion inquiry, that could be social justice, that could be choosing pathways other than like nuclear structure and relationship, or an example of that for me is friendships hold as strong of affection to me oftentimes as say loverships.
Hmm.
There's they're different ways in which we connect, but the love itself is not
Hmm.
different per
Hmm.
se. And or the way I connect to the more than human world, like, I mean, trees and flowers and plants, these are all friends. They're not just like, something that was just placed here happenstance, or, just for humans to only take pleasure in. I think they also receive pleasure and nurturance and things. So I think it's like queer feels, now that I'm talking about it, like quite relational to me in a
Hmm.
way. And I also really appreciate the term and identification as queer just in like a broader context, kind of somewhere on the spectrum of where individuals identify. And I think that like can um, can be really helpful at times in groups where people can just like really be themselves.
I
Um,
think it's a really important distinguishing factor because for me, one of the reasons I started the whole podcast is that in my 50s, the definition of queer has changed radically in the
so
30 years.
much.
Oh my gosh. And it's crazy. I mean, really crazy to me that I can walk into Target and buy queer paraphernalia. I mean, it literally says queer on it. I'm like, what the heck happened here? That it's become commodified. And so every person that's been on this show so far has really talked about it as edge surfing. It's the
Mm,
places where we can define ourselves, where we can unhook ourselves from dominant cultural paradigms
yes.
and define ourselves for ourselves. And I think that that is, for me as well, the essence of being queer
Yeah.
is not having to follow all the check boxes of whatever label. And I think you're probably the first person that's not true. You're one of the few people who've brought in the connection to nature
Mm,
and your relationship to nature as part of your queer identity.
hmm.
I like this part of it being relational, and I like that, I'm a Gemini, so I like the separation out of, oh, the gay is my sexuality and the queer is my thinking, and maybe some hybrid in between is true.
Yeah, and I love that you brought the piece of what queer once meant and how that um, is shifting and changing over time. And I actually think that's a really big piece. I remember, taking queer literature at the community college, and you know, in that class there were multiple generations, and it was really interesting to see how the term queer uh, landed for different people, particularly in different generations. And sometimes I pull those two apart um, because I also think it's really important to, in as queer has become like such a more broad um, identity in certain ways. It's really important for me to also be mindful of how someone walks through the world, how someone is perceived walking through the world, what that can mean for different individuals of different identities. And so, yeah, I think that's also sometimes why I can tend to pull the two apart. Um, and I also love going back to the nature pieces. I mean, nature has been one of the biggest allies for me in my own gender and sexuality and queer exploration. I feel like I've learned everything from the more than human world, um, or so much about who I feel myself to be. Um, and so, yeah, it's powerful.
You started it recording again. I'm pausing. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, I remember taking queer lit at the Santa Rosa Junior College, and there were a lot of different generations of people, and it was interesting to see how the term queer landed with different people, particularly of different generations. And I think sometimes I can pull apart for myself an identity, queer and gay, because because it used to be such a derogatory term, and it
Hmm.
used to really mean that um someone's like freedom, someone's lifestyle was very at jeopardy, and it still is that in many places. And so I think as the word queer for me continues to expand in its capacity, which I think is super beautiful. I think sometimes it's just I have to come back to center and really be mindful of how someone walks through the world, how someone is perceived walking through the world, what that means for someone's freedoms or safety, or all of these things, and for myself. So I think that there are differentiations there as well, because you know, I think, there are, depending on what even someone looks like or something, they can be perceived very differently. And I think that that's a really sacred thing to hold and be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
And also, just circling back to the nature pieces, I just feel like I have just learned so much about myself through nature. It has been one of my greatest allies in my gender journey and sexuality journey and queer journey so far. I learned so much from the more than human world about
Mm-hmm.
myself.
That sounds really queer. I'll just say it straight
Yeah, yeah.
across. So, like,
Yeah.
how do you learn about, yeah, right, gay as fuck. So how the heck would you learn about your gender through seaweed? I mean, what are you talking about? Can you break that down? Like, I'm sorry, I'm too practical for
Well,
that.
I think like when I really started tuning more into my non-human friends and allies was a very, very, very challenging, traumatic time in my life. And I would just observe them. I would observe like their different shapes and features and characteristics and the feelings that arose, when leaves kind of move and tickle you or something. And I think I just started really exploring just like the bigger spectrum or dynamic spaces in myself. Like, oh, I am like so much more than like she, or what that means in like this like more dominant box.
Yep.
And so yeah, I think it really started getting me, because I don't like look at a tree in that way. I look at a tree in a really dynamic way. And so I started looking at myself more dynamically, and then started looking at other humans more dynamically, just kind of like, oh wow, you're so much more than just like that one identity that's like slapped on us when we're born. And that's
Yeah.
that. So
That was so beautifully said, Sonia. It really is incredible to me, like that is where queer is going to.
Mhm.
And for me, that is where it almost started, was just that I couldn't fit into the lesbian box at all.
Yeah,
And I wasn't willing to try. And so then it opened up everything. And then as we open up everything, that is where the practitioner piece comes in for me.
yeah.
Because once we're undone from our boxes and we just get to be who we are, how are we with ourselves? And so of
Mm,
course that brings me to the like, hey, you're a practitioner and healer, which for me,
mm.
queer and healers, I mean, my whole podcast is queer healers. So they go together because we are unbound. We've unbound
Mm,
ourselves from these boxes into
mm.
these places of outside of societal norms, which is phenomenal for healing. So talk to me a little bit about that piece for you. Like as a healer,
Mm,
w- how does that tie in?
mm. Well, what really rises for me when you ask that question is I I think that the more I unbind myself and am able to see myself, the more I can see that in someone else. And I think right there that creates a really beautiful relationship, in that, so that that ability, because I feel like really in like the healing arts, I mean, I'm not doing anything to heal anyone per se. I'm giving someone the space to unwind, to settle, to like have a deeper inquiry inward. And so I think the doing that work and the continuation of doing that work, you know, people people tend to feel that, and there can oftentimes be a comfort and ease in that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really do, you know, in like my Ayurvedic practice, oftentimes it is a lot of consultation and kind of like Q&A and kind of detective work. And, you know, oftentimes someone's coming with a specific imbalance or inquiry. And, you know, there's herbs, there's foods, there's practices, there's so many things on a very like human material level that, you know, you can run with. But then I think there's also just this thing that happens between practitioner and client, that the more I regulate myself, the more I unwind myself, the more that gives someone else permission to do that. So it's almost like a tuning in, and it's not really me, I feel like they're tuning into. It's more me holding like almost a permissive space so that they can really tune into themselves. Or at least that's my deepest love of working in like a practitioner client environment, is I get so excited to, you know, be in that journey with someone's own like self-discovery and self-empowerment. um
I so get what you're saying, and I just gonna be frank in conversation because we can do that together. That's the point of
yeah,
this for me,
yeah.
is that that's when it starts to sound like woo-woo. And people are like, "What the heck are you talking about?" And so what I'd like to just kind of play with you is
Hmm.
that like it's almost been easier for people to unhook from the dominant paradigms around gender,
Yeah,
around sexuality, than it is from to unbind from the Western medical model.
100%.
Well, but so then here we are on this podcast,
Hmm.
and like I don't know if our listeners even know what Ayurvedic is, right?
Mm.
So we and some people will, and some people won't. But I
Hmm.
think this idea, there's this bridge from what you were talking about with the queerness
Hmm.
and from being a practitioner, for holding space for people to feel themselves, that I think is a little bit rough because our whole society and our whole patterning is indoctrinated in believing that we turn our bodies over like a lump of meat and
Absolutely.
somebody fixes you.
Absolutely.
So how do you make that bridge? Like I personally, I don't want to come into a room where you're playing a sound bowl and holding space for me. Do something. Like I'm like,
Hmm.
what the hell? What are you
Well,
doing?
but I think for some people that really is doing something. I think
Sure.
it is a matter of client, and I think as a practitioner, you know, that's something I feel very skilled at, is, you know, kind of um reading a room or reading the a client. And like, I mean, with Ayurveda, it's always based on, you know, we're co-creating a program or a system, or, you know, looking at an outcome that we would like to see, or a client wants to see, and like, okay, how can we carve that out into simple, oftentimes very simple steps to like move towards that outcome. But I think that there is a lot of power in having those conversations, because I agree with you. Most people that I have seen, it has been indoctrinated into most of us to turn our bodies over. and to not know that we have an inner authority and an inner sovereignty towards our own well-being. I think it can look very different per client.
Without a doubt, I agree.
Like
Yeah.
if someone comes in and they have a really disrupted nervous system or something like that, I would use sound healing with them just to, get them maybe just in a place where the body feels settled enough to even start to hear those like internal impulses or that like internal confidence or something.
But how do you bridge that, Sonia? I mean, if we're talking about like this bridge in the queer world and,
Mhm.
starting, I even she'd you once, they, them, like this whole, like we're walking in this gray world here.
Yeah.
And when we're walking in the gray world, and I feel like with the healing modalities particular, so how would you teach me? My nervous system's really jangled. I think playing this flute over you is going to change it. And I'm going, what the hell? Where's my ibuprofen? Like, right?
Right.
Like, how do you make
Right.
that bridge personally?
Well, I think I like that question. One is I do my best not to shame what somebody's already doing.
Awesome.
So, if someone comes in and they are seeing me for a consultation and they have this symptom and this symptom and this symptom, I'm going to automatically, one, ask them if they know what Ayurveda is or what they think Ayurveda is.
Right.
And I'm going to ask them what they're already doing, what they've been trying. And then, well, what is working? Do you know what isn't working? And in those questions, I think one, there's a bridging of like, okay, this practitioner sitting in front of me isn't automatically going to this, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Because I think right
Amen.
there, like the
Mm-hmm.
conversation has already stopped.
Thank you.
And
Mm-hmm.
but it's also having them turn their inquiry inward and be like, like, well, what is working? And like, what isn't working? Well, it's not, whatever's working isn't working necessarily quite the way I want it to, because I'm still needing to I'm still seeking something else to like balance this issue or something like that. So I think really, really practicing meeting somebody where they are is so, so important. And if someone comes in and I mean, it's such an interesting conversation for me because I think health can take so many different forms, and I don't actually think it's always about diet and eating the right things and this and that, but just to be like, very more clinical or precise. Like if someone comes in and they are having, say, gallstones or liver issues or, a gamut of things. And, we start having conversation and I say, well, what does your diet look like? And they're like, well, I eat McDonald's 5 times a week, and I'm like, okay, I can see how that's going to potentially lead to the symptoms that you're like, that you're sharing with me. I'm not going to go right into it and be like, well, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. We're going to start
Right.
having a conversation about like things that you could bring in. What do the other aspects of your life look like? Do you, do you get exercise? Like, does your home feel joyful and safe? Like, so we're going to be having a lot of different conversations about someone as a whole person. And I think that right there is, for me, the biggest difference that I've seen in like the westernized medical complex and like holistic medicine is that you are looking at a whole person, and you're aiming to work with someone in a holistic way, in a whole way, not just like one little like, we'll take that piece out and everything's going to be fine. But you're really like, well, how do we get you living the life you want to live and the lifestyle that you want to live? is really more the question.
I totally get you on that, and I'm going to challenge you on that because
Mm,
I think it's a queer holistic healing model. I think that one of the people that I really like, her book, Carrie Kelly wrote a book called Detox America,
mhm,
America Detox. And she's talking about the wellness industrial complex.
mhm,
And it's become memes of naturopaths doing the
mhm,
exact same thing of, well, if you just spend $5,000 on these nutraceuticals, which is not pharmaceuticals, but they're all supplements, then you'll be well. And
mhm,
so the idea, the paradigm of the Western industrial complex, if I do these yoga poses, which you know quite a bit about, then I will be well. If I do all the right new agey things, then I'll be well. As opposed to the queerifying of that in my
mhm,
mind,
mhm,
of looking at, hey, eat McDonald's. I'm glad you're eating McDonald's 5 days a week. Let's talk about how that does affect your liver or not.
mhm,
What can we do here that's going to make you feel more whole,
mhm,
as opposed to assuming that it's going to be, let me make a lot of money off my nutraceuticals.
mhm,
So I think there is this piece that you're speaking to that I really want to pull out, which is that one, let's not shame people. Let's celebrate where they are.
mhm.
And then let's look at their whole being and look at where they are in their emotional body, in their physical body, in their spiritual body, in their biochemical body, which is, what they're eating, the chemistry that makes them up. I think that's very, very important. And, I think there's a lot of leadership that does have to take place
Mhm.
because that, even I have a young man in my life, now 17. Oh my gosh. Um, but they didn't ever teach how to listen to your body in school. I didn't learn it. You didn't learn it. Nobody has been taught how to communicate with their body, let alone what makes their liver work or not work, or what their liver's for. I mean, they're pulling out organs left and right. You don't
Mhm.
need a gallbladder, you don't need an appendix. They're
Mhm.
just extra. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to get queerified as opposed to mm, I just feel like the alternative medicine model has also bought out and sold out and become corrupted.
Oh, is that what you're challenging me on?
That's what I'm challenging you on.
Okay, got it, got it.
Mhm.
I think I hear us saying the same thing, maybe slightly different terms. I agree with you. I think the holistic medicine, I mean, I think it's like way out of control.
Way out of control.
So I very much agree and hear what you're saying. And I, as a practitioner, for me, it is about education. It is about meeting someone where they're at and looking at them as a whole person, and like, why do you do the things that you do? Like, why do you lead your life in this way or that way, or whatnot? Like, let's actually have like a whole conversation about that. And like, like, I mean, lymph is like a primary thing. I mean, that's probably what I talk with clients about the most. It's
So what
when
is your
I'm
lymph system?
yeah, so our lymphatic system, which is ties into our immunity, the way that our body stay keeps from getting sick, from getting run down. The what gives us energy, what gives us the ability to fight disease or illness. And oftentimes people have no idea what a lymph node is, those little pearls in our rivers of the body, or that we have to move our lymph, that the lymph doesn't actually move on its own. We have to do that through deeper breathing or through movement or through laughter or singing or sex or whatever that activity is. And so that's just like a very primary conversation I have with people. But you know access to knowledge is everything. I
Mhm.
mean, people, I know, like, um, I went on this fantastic backpacking trip this last summer and followed a river, from start basically till end, and watched the way the water moved. and how the terrain changed and stuff. And uh, until I had access to that experience, my connection to that water, to that, you know, was so very different. I didn't think about how water comes out of my faucet and things as much until I actually got to experience that river flowing. And so I feel like it's very similar with education around our bodies, is that we just, until we have access to that education, like we can't change what we don't know necessarily, you know, or can't do something different if we don't know or have tools or access to be able to do something different.
So
So
on that note,
yeah.
you know what I'm going to ask you, which is great. I want to have access to something different. Will you give us some tools for either working with our lymph or
Mm,
like what tools would you give to your queer community so that they can take charge of their bodies?
mm, hmm. Well, yeah, I love the topic of lymph. Um, so and hmm,
And maybe Sonia, start with defining it because I do think not everybody knows what the lymphatic system is. And I
yeah,
think even tying it into the river walk because it is a river. It's a
it
whole
is a river.
circulatory system in our
Yeah.
body for our immune system that is
Well,
under known.
yeah, absolutely. And so just like one like really amazing practice that I love and that I love to teach people and is a very traditional practice in Ayurveda is called Abhyanga. So Abhyanga both moves the lymph and it also very much settles the nervous system. And it's something that you can have a practitioner do. Like you could come into my office and you could see me and I can do that for you, but you can also do it for yourself. And what happens with Abhyanga is multiple things. One is it literally moves the lymph as you're doing it. And it also has you like touch your body, which
Mm.
automatically starts to move the lymph. Touch, even the lightest of touches, automatically stimulates that lymph. It automatically starts to stimulate that that parasympathetic response in the body. And so like after a shower is when I usually will do Abhyanga for myself, and I'll just take a little bit of, I love to take sunflower oil because it's one of the most inexpensive oils, and also it's what's considered tridoshic, meaning that it mostly will work on anyone. And so I like to take a little bit of oil. I run a little more oily, so I don't love a ton, but some people just want to like, you know, like lather themselves in it. I encourage you to do that if that's you. And, you know, I start down at my feet and I just start to like rub that oil in to my skin. And the thing with the lymphatic system is you need to move upward, right? Because all the lymph it pumps towards the heart and then down into the digestive tract. And so you start to move that lymph upward in the body and you start to stimulate all of that amazing immunity that our bodies are designed to have. And simultaneously, we start to touch ourselves and feel our skin. And just the cool thing about like a raw natural oil is that it literally soaks into the skin. And so not only does the surface
Dear goodness, you froze again. Shoot. Okay. Hang
okay.
on. It came back. And so what you said, it soaks into the skin. And not only and then we lost you. So,
Okay.
for
Okay.
those who are editing, they're going to start again right now.
So not only does the surface of the skin get that amazing oil, but it starts to penetrate more deeply and it goes into the deeper layers of skin. And so I feel like our touch does the same thing. It's like when I started receiving massage back in my 20s and started practicing massage and body work shortly after, I I noticed like, yeah, that touch, that ability to stabilize, that ability to connect with what's below my skin started becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And so that to me is also one of the greatest benefits of Abhyanga is not only does it have like a very, very legitimate um, uh, function, but it also creates connection. And I know to connect with somebody else, I really have to be connected to myself first. So, and that to me is part of where, you know, I feel like these practices and stuff can be such a beautiful way of creating connection and safety out in our more external world. But it really starts to first create that internally. Um, yeah.
So I do love all of this for a practice, and I do just, as a person in the world, why does Ayurvedic is so into oil? Like
I know,
it's
right?
it's like oilinate, more
All
oil.
the time.
What is that about?
Well, yes, that is true. In a way that I think can be a little bit on the westernized side. I mean, Ayurveda is into a lot of things. We use a lot of oil, both in places like India and things. They also use a lot of oil there, but I think we definitely really fixate and focus on it here. And partially the thing with oil is it's a nutritive and it's very, very what we would call vata pacifying. And vata is like your ether air state, right? Or even pitta pacifying, which is more your fire or sometimes fire water state. And so culturally, we have, quite a bit of dominance in vata and pitta in certain ways. And so that oil is so satiating to the nervous system and so hydrating and so cooling at times. So it's really a profound remedy in certain ways to balance out a culture of dryness, of almost like overaction. Yeah. But yeah, Ayurveda in general really does love oil, which actually isn't my favorite part of it. But
No, but I think it's really an awesome practice that you're bringing in because one, we're doing the touch and connection to self
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
feeling your body, which is everything you were just talking about.
Yeah,
Two, we're moving the lymph, which is really important in these times where people are concerned about flus and viruses,
yes,
and moving the lymph back towards our heart and the major pumps. And
yes,
then third, the oil and oilination is a way of helping the body um, tonify.
absolutely.
So I think you naturally just kind of intuitively wove all these pieces together through the oil, and I think it's a wonderful way to go. I really do. I think it's lovely. And
Yeah,
particularly in the winter when it's dry. I'm sorry, but we all could use a little more oil in the dry.
absolutely. And it
Mhm.
kind of like, it's a buffer too, right? Like anything that hydrates us more gives us more of a almost like a buffer in the world, like but like a bit of a softer buffer, kind of like I mean, this may also sound woo, but Ayurveda is so energetic in so many ways too. It's very much based on energy, but it it trickles into the physical body, and so it's a buffer for that like electromagnetic field or our psyche. When it's like we're protecting our skin, but at the same time leaving it open for connection. Um, and I think that's really beautiful.
That's incredible. I think it's
Yeah.
a great thing to add to our toolbox. I know that we're ending the near of our time, and I want to invite people. We barely touched all of the wonderful gifts that you bring to the world.
Mm.
So if you would tell us how we can reach you and what you're up to and all of those things.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you can check me out on Instagram under Hari Cook. Um, and I'm starting to work on some website things. I worked in a clinic for quite a while, and now I'm kind of starting to branch off in different directions. So Instagram would be the best place right
Spell
now.
it out for us. Not everybody knows.
HARICOOK. Um, and as far as what I'm doing right now, I'm kind of in a more development stage. I'm really starting to put more energy towards some relational coaching and soundscape experiences and events. And just I've kind of been taking a bit of a pause from Ayurveda to look at just the many layers of one, practicing Ayurveda as a white-bodied person, but also just reassessing what it means to me and how the foundations of it are moving, how I'm moving forward with it. So both as far as you know uh, both in a relational way and also just in a basic wellness way. And if you're seeking relational coaching, that's something that I'm really inspired and excited about right now.
So I'm going to break this down just in my little structural way because I'm such a structural girl. You can do relational coaching, not just in relationship
There
to
you
other
go.
people, but you can also do coaching in relationship to the environment. So when she's talking relational,
Absolutely.
when they are talking relational, they're talking relational to environment as well as humans. And also,
Relational to environment,
you can contact.
relational to environments. So, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Uh,
Oh,
so you
yeah,
froze again, so I was trying to fill. So we're going to have a couple of choppy moments in this podcast, and we
yeah,
apologize to you all, but we've had an unstable
yeah.
connection. So I will reiterate this part for the editors. Um, so when Sonia is talking about relational, they are talking about relational in terms of the environment as well as to humanity. But if you want to seek out an incredible coach, you can do somatic coaching, Ayurvedic coaching, massage therapy, sound therapy, creative works like art, as well as relational counseling. All of these things are things that you do provide, even if the structure is not yet made for people to contact you. Like if they wanted to reach out to you, you'd be very well qualified to do any of those things. Is that true?
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
putting words in your mouth, but
Yeah. Well, I think you said it maybe a little better than I did.
well, I don't know about better, but maybe a little more structural. I've got that part down. Oh, shoot.
Yes.
Well, I am so grateful
Well
to have
done.
you on here. And I'm going to pause us. And
Yes.
anything else you want to say that you're like, I didn't get to say, I want to put this out.
Um, drink a cup of tulsi tea if you can.
Right on. I'm a big tea drinker. That's a wonderful way to go
Yeah,
out. Okay,
good
much
adaptogen.
blessings. Thank you for being on here, and I'm gonna pause us.